Hi everyone, I'm Kevin J. Kennedy, and this is the Horror Show, episode 3. And tonight I have David Sodergren with me. David has been on the scene for quite a while now. I came across his work when I read The Forgotten Island, and I've been following him since. He's now got 10 books available. I've read 6 of those, and I'm going to have a wee chat with him about some of his books tonight. How you doing, David?
I'm very well, thanks, Kevin. It's nice to chat to a Scottish lad.
It's nice. There's not an awful lot of Scottish horror authors, eh?
There certainly is not. No. So it's a nice wee change. Nice wee change. I'm glad to be here.
That's quite a collection of. Is that DVDs and books behind you? Is that a mixture, or is it?
Yeah, that's just DVDs and Blu-rays there. So it does. It goes up, and yeah, it's gone to the point now where they're having to sit in front of the row behind, which is very upsetting. But run out of space. Run out of
This is an
space.
issue, eh? Right. So as I say, I'd first read The Forgotten Island. Was that your first release? Or
It was, yeah, that was my very first novel that I published. Not the first one I wrote, but the first one that I published. And that would have been, I want to say, about 6 years ago. I think that was, yeah, September 2018. Oh, God, yeah. Aye, 6 years.
right. So, I mean, I had when I came across it. I think at the time you'd maybe released a few books because I bought that and I bought Night Shoot together. I bought the paperbacks of them. I can't remember if you'd something else out at the time. As I say, because I've been following you for a few years now. And somebody had recommended it to me. I forget who recommended it, but somebody told me I would like it because it was very Lehman-esque. So I'm a big fan of Richard Lehman, if you don't know that. And as I've read through your books, I've felt that they've all got a kind of nostalgia about them and touch upon they've got that kind of 80s horror vibe kind of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're a relatively new author. So, what inspired you to write The Forgotten Island then, since that was your first book? Or, well, your first release?
Yeah, I mean, that one in particular had been inspired by it sounds terrible to say, it had been inspired by my honeymoon, which was wonderful, absolutely lovely. My wife is just next door. We're still married. It was great. Um, on that particular trip, we'd gone to Thailand, which is where the book is set. And there'd been a couple of things that had inspired me for that one. We'd been on a lovely boat trip. And from that boat, we could see an island that had like this ruined resort or this unfinished resort, some abandoned thing. And that got me thinking, oh, what the hell's on there? And then that evening, we'd gone for tea, dinner for you Americans. Um, and we'd been sitting enjoying that. And then I looked up and there was a massive fucking spider right in the parasol umbrella thing right above my head. So we screamed and freaked out and ran away. Um, and those two incidents together sort of formed the basis of the Forgotten Island, which originally my sort of thoughts for before I'd even come up with anything like that was that I'd wanted to write a novel that was kind of in the vein of the early 80s Italian cannibal movies.
Yeah,
Like Cannibal Holocaust, Cannibal Ferox, Last Cannibal World, stuff like that.
yeah,
Partly because I enjoyed one or two of them, but mostly because most of them are total garbage. And I was like, how can you mess this up? It's like people trapped in the jungle. There's these people that want to eat you. They know the jungle better than you. The whole thing, it's like the perfect recipe for horror and excitement and thrills. And all these films are just so dreadful. So I was like, well, I wanted to write one that was actually good, you know.
yeah.
Um, so that was the sort of basis for the Forgotten Island, and then it took on a whole because it was my first book. I think I just started to throw absolutely everything at it. So there's like psychic visions and cults and cosmic horror and things I won't spoil. So it's a bit of a melting pot of influences. That one, because when you're writing your first book, you're not entirely sure if you're even going to finish that one book, never mind write another 9, 10, 20, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, bit of everything in that one.
And by
But
the time I came across the book, it was popular. So I don't think I discovered it just as you released it. Um, did that book really take off, or were you in your second or third release when you started to get quite a following, or how did that come about?
I mean, when I first put it out, I had, I think at the time, about 3,000 Instagram followers, and my goal was to get 10% of them to read it. Because there's people think that followers and stuff, even your friends and family, are probably not going to read your book because it's quite a commitment, and especially if you're writing really grimy horror, they're probably not going to read it. So that I was looking for about 300 people to read it. Would have been my absolute dream goal, and I did get that in the first month or two or something. But I would say I didn't really get. I that sounds. I don't know how you measure success, but probably book 8 for me. The Har was when things really start to get much more interesting, much bigger.
Yeah.
So it's certainly not an overnight success. It's 8 books.
I mean, the Har's one that I've seen spoken about quite a bit in different horror groups online and things like that. The Har's your sort of coastal, creepy type of horror.
Yeah, it's a bit of a romance, that one.
Done sort of I found the God, my mind's just blank through the name of it. The book about a witch.
Maggie's Grave.
Maggie's Grave. Maggie's Grave was creepy, but also, it goes a wee bit mental. I can still really remember when I don't want to give away too much spoilers, but when the witch is chasing them, sort of down I don't know if it's a mountain or a hill from memory, but and then when they're kind of they get further on for that. As I say, I'm not going to say too much to give away plot spoilers for your book or anything like that, but that was quite creepy and then goes mental. A bit like you're talking about the change we obviously in the Forgotten Island when it goes through just a cannibal story and then there's cosmic horror and other things brought in. I quite enjoy that when books turn the corner and surprise you a wee bit rather than reading the full 300 pages and it's kind of what you're getting from beginning to end. You've done that with a few of your books. Is that the type of horror you enjoy yourself then?
Yeah, I think it's really important the reader to keep surprising them where you can. You can do that a number of ways, and one is absolutely to just have it started off like a bit of like Maggie's Grave in a way, almost, and Perfect Victim in a way as well. One of my books, they both start off kind of like feeling like a YA thing almost, with just kids hanging about, and there's a bit of a threat, there's some mild peril, and it's like and then it just goes absolutely fucking nuts. After that, and then I like to have you not sure who's going to live or die because it's quite difficult, because you generally have your main protagonist and it's pretty obvious they're going to at least make it to the end. So you have to really keep people on their toes with that and occasionally kill people that you do not expect to die and things. I just also love every single subgenre of horror. So if I can start writing one thing and then take a little sidestep into a completely separate subgenre, it just makes me happy because I get to write I get to write a kidnap thriller and then a possession thing, in the same book. It's good fun.
Yeah.
It's good fun. I think it is a big influence from things like I watch a lot of Asian films, Hong Kong cinema in particular, and they will go from slapstick comedy to brutal revenge to insane fantasy monsters and stuff, and they'll do that in the space of 10 minutes. So I think, I just love that. I love not quite knowing what's going to come next, and then when it does, just being like, "What? I did not expect that." So yeah.
When you write these stories, then do you find that are you what they call a pantser? Do you sort of get an idea, start it, and then see where you end up, or have you got a good inkling of where you're going to take it?
I outline the entire book, chapter by chapter. First of all, yeah. I know some people are like, "Oh no, I'd never outline, never outline. It's the opposite of creativity and stuff." I just view it as the first draft because you're still just sitting down, coming up with ideas, writing them down. It just means that when you sit down and start to properly write and get, you've probably got a slight sense of who the characters are by that point. You've got a good idea of what your pacing is going to be, which is really important for me, certainly. Like a well-paced book. I don't just mean fast-paced, but just well-paced.
Yeah.
So I very much enjoy outlining. And then, of course, as you're writing it, it can completely change. So the book I'm currently writing at the moment, which is a sort of coming of age type one, but with lots of monsters in it, that I completely outlined it, and about halfway through a huge, it sounds so stupid. I like accidentally killed a character, and then something else happened, and I was like, well, okay, I've reached a point where my outline now makes no sense at all. So I stopped. I re-outlined the second half of the book, and then continued on. So it's still completely open, but I find that once you've got a full outline and you know what your next chapter is and where you're supposed to be going.
So my wife's coming in. The dog coming in.
That's fine. My wife is looking after our dog next door because he would be exactly the same. He's a nightmare.
Just we're going to a walk. Sorry for that. So you had to redirect with that one then, and kind of just
Yeah. So it's good to know where you're supposed to be going, so that as soon as I finish one chapter, I'm like, okay, well, the next chapter is this and this and this, so I can go straight into it, and that's how I can write really quickly, because I spent a good amount of time trying to outline it, and treating that outline as a first draft. So it does have dialogue, and it does, key bits of dialogue that I want to include, and key phrases that I've come up with or something. So it's a sort of it's 90% plotter and 10% pantser. But yeah, I would never just do an outline and then say, right, that's it, I'm just going to write that, because I think, as someone said once, I can't remember who it was, but they were like, whatever your first idea is, for a major sort of thing or a set piece or something, scrap it and come up with a second idea. And then once you've done that, scrap that and come up with a third idea, because your first idea is usually going to be the most generic, the most sort of cliche, done before. And if you force yourself to then think of something better and then something better than that, then you're more likely to come up with something good. So yeah, the outline is it is just an outline. It's not a 10 commandments or something carved in stone. It's but I find it very useful to do, certainly.
Yeah. How close are you to finishing your next book then? Will we see that soon?
I would imagine so. Yeah, I just finished the first draft, which, well, if you count the outline, it's second draft. I quit my job recently. I say recently, about 2 weeks ago, to write full time, and so in those 2 weeks, I've written about 40,000 words of it. So I would very much hope to have that one out. It's not going to be by October, but certainly I'll hope to have it out before Christmas. I've not sorted out the cover art or anything for it. I keep meaning to email a guy. I've got 2 finished first drafts now. That and another book, a sort of extreme horror one as well. So once one of them's out, the other one's going to follow fairly shortly after. I would hope, now I'm not working at a day job and I'm writing full time, to have at least 2 books out a year. Hopefully more. We'll see.
How are you finding the transition then? Are you doing a lot more writing with that extra time? Is it hard to just sit and do it all day? Or where are you at with it?
No, I love it. I absolutely love it. Because normally I used to work, I worked 5 days a week, then 4, then 3, and then I was down to 2 days a week. Yeah. And I would work 2 days, long sort of 11-hour shifts in a shop, and then I would come home and write. I would write on my days off and stuff. I'd be tired from work and things. So now, Monday to Friday, I'm working, but I'm completely on my own schedule. I'm very disciplined with it, so I still get up as if I was going to work. So I get up about 7 o'clock or something, and then just start writing. And it doesn't feel like a job, because it's when I'm at my absolute happiest is when I'm sitting writing my stories. So so far it's been an absolute fucking dream.
That's amazing, mate. That's great to hear. Well, I suppose, obviously, I love your books. As I say, I've read 6 of the 10 that you've released so far. So I just need to catch up. But as I say, the main thing that slows me down is putting the books together. So I'm reading subs that people are sending me to kind of put a book out, and a wee bit of writing here and there. So reading for pleasures. I've not got as much time as I used to have, as much as I enjoy
Tell me about
reading.
it.
But so I suppose, why writing then? What made you write the first? But obviously you like horror. You obviously enjoy writing. But before you came, what made you write that first book? Then was it? Did you read a lot of horror yourself? What made you sit down and do it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been absolutely obsessed with horror for ever. All my earliest sort of childhood memories are of horror related, watching King Kong on telly, watching The Thing from Another World and stuff. But back when you may remember when they used to show. Actually, I don't know how old you are. I maybe just insulted you. But in the in the mid-80s,
Yeah,
during the day they would show like black and white films on BBC
yeah.
Two and stuff. So you would see little bits of Tarantula and The Thing from Another World and things like that. I started writing. The earliest thing I've got is I say a short story. Yeah, I was in primary 3, which for American listeners would mean that I was what, 7? You 7 in primary 3?
Yeah.
7? Yeah. So, and that's a horror sci-fi thing about aliens coming to my school and killing everybody apart from me, which is yeah. But and then I started writing like little sequels. So I wrote like a Child's Play 3 because there wasn't a Child's Play 3 at that point. So this would be probably 1990 or something. Then I read horror non-stop. I watched horror non-stop. I still watch horror non-stop. Reading it, like you say, Kevin, it is. It's difficult to find the time now when you're trying to write, edit, promote, market, publish books constantly. Audiobooks have been good for that, but then now I don't go to work anymore. I'm not listening to it. Yeah, we'll figure it out. But yeah, I think I didn't think I could write a book. I think that's what put me off for years and years and years. So I didn't start until I was in my mid-30s. And then I tried it. And it was a case of sort of finding time as well, and sort of having like my wife has been she's extremely supportive and like gives me the time, or gave me the time that I needed back then to just sit and write. She didn't need a lot of attention. She didn't demand. So I was able to sort of start, and I just found I loved it. I've always been a huge fan of horror, huge fan of reading and writing, but also of the English language as well. I absolutely love language, and like words and the rhythm of words and things like that. So that's certainly come in handy. and grammar.
I get what you're saying about the sort of mid-80s. I think every cartoon had monsters in it, and as I say, I can remember as well that the Monsters and the Addams Family was on fairly regularly. And although it's not horror, it's monsters again. And
it's horror adjacent, absolutely. Yeah, I class Scooby Doo as horror.
Well, that was as I say, Scooby Doo was a great cartoon. As I say, it turned out that the monster was always a person, and that's probably something that you're right. And your horror sometimes as well, isn't it? It's the people rather than the monsters. But no, I loved everything, and then obviously probably more into the early 90s. You had stuff like Outer Limits and X-Files, which again probably come under sci-fi, but a lot of horror elements in them and things like that.
Definitely.
And I remember, I don't know if it was late 80s or early 90s, I don't know if you remember a show, Erie, Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
Left in the area, that was brilliant as well. But there was loads of stuff out then to kind of inspire you.
It was great. Erie, Indiana was, I think that was Joe Dante who did like Gremlins and The Howling and Piranha and stuff. I'm sure he was like one of the driving forces behind that. So that's probably why it was so good. Because it was great.
When you started reading horror then, who were the authors that you fell in love with? Who's your go-to authors when you've got time to read?
I mean, I think the very first like proper full adult horror that I'd ever read, so not like the Alfred Hitchcock Three Investigators books or anything like that. Like proper like adult horror was James Herbert's The Fog. My dad at his work had a little library, so he brought that home for me to read, which was pretty life changing because that book was, I mean, it's still absolutely fantastic. Got me in a lot of trouble at school when my teachers found me reading it, because there's a certain scene in a school gymnasium that children aged 8 or 9 should not be reading. But I was. But yeah, James Herbert, huge. After that, I read Rats, Domain, and Lair and things. My gran also, she worked in a charity shop, so she would bring home Stephen King's that she would find. So I read The Stand and Dead Zone and things like that. But I'd say my absolute favorite then, my favorite now, I remember going on a wee day trip to Peebles, and they had a wee charity shop there, and I picked up a little book called Spawn by Sean Hudson. Have you read that one?
I've read Sean's work, but I've not read Spawn. I've got a few of his books in my library as well, but I've just I say library, I've got a ton of bookshelves and I've got boxes of books. I've got 1,000 paperbacks. I read mostly Kindle these days, but I still buy paperbacks. I enjoy Sean's work.
Oh, sure, it's absolutely incredible. I loved it because, unlike, Stephen King was amazing, incredible to read, but there's something about Herbert and especially Hudson as well that just felt really uniquely British. It was always raining, it was always miserable, and they were just so gritty and scummy, and like you had, in Sean Hudson, you had your heroin addicts and your London Cockney gangsters and things like that, and it just felt different. It felt a little bit more dangerous, maybe a bit more, for lack of a better term, edgy, for for a 10-year-old, but there was something about Sean Hudson as well, that just, I don't know, he just spoke to me, and I think it's I hate saying this because I know that Sean Hudson tells a story about how he read Guy N. Smith and was like, "Oh, this is rubbish. I could do better than this." And it's Guy N. Smith that inspired him to write, which is cruel. But I feel the same way about Sean, but without saying he was bad, because Sean did inspire me to write. I always feel bad saying that in case he somehow hears it and thinks, "Oh, because I'm terrible." No, 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 no. It's just. Yeah, I just there was something about Sean Hudson. I read every single one of his up until I think Lucy's Child, and then recently I went back and he's got some new ones out that I read, and yeah, he's still totally got it, man. Oh, he's fantastic.
I think, am I right in saying that these days he does sort of more kind of crime fiction as opposed to horror? Am I mixing that up? I've seen a few of the covers of the books, and they don't look horror, although I'm sure there'll still be horror elements in them. It's all his older stuff I've got, but.
Yeah, he's got a series. I've not read any of them, I don't think, or I think I might have read one, which is more crime based, I think, from what I gather. But he's done a sequel to Spawn that I keep meaning to read, and he did one a couple of years ago that was, to be fair, it was a complete rip off of the 70s film Race with the Devil. I don't know if you've ever seen that, where the Satanists are chasing the. Oh, it's a fantastic film, and he did his own version of that. But you know what? It's a Sean Hudson version of Race with the Devil, so I was 100% in because it was just really good fun. So he has gone back. He still does horror.
He sent me the odd story for the books, as I say, but
yes, was he not in the book that I was in? Because that was like a dream come true for me, I think.
He might have been. I need to check that one.
It was the Sapphire edition. I have a feeling he was.
I know you were in the Sapphire. I can't remember if Sean was in that one or not.
Yeah.
But as I say, I speak to Sean from time to time. I invited him to the Splatterpunk edition, which was the last release in the horror collection, and he was going to send something in, and things conflicted time-wise, and he didn't. But he did mention that he didn't consider himself a Splatterpunk author. So I don't know if that was bandied about a lot. I've not seen that, but it must be something that maybe niggles at him a wee bit. But who knows? As I say, he was going to send something in for the book, so he obviously does write a little bit in that genre. But
it's the term splatterpunk and extreme horror and stuff. I'm never quite sure what the difference is between them. So
I know, and I mentioned that a bit in the foreword for the book because I think there is a bit of a blend. And splatterpunk. When I was reading like Richard Lehman, in the probably early 90s. And he would sometimes mention authors like David Shaw and other authors that probably inspired him, or other people that were writing at the same time that were being called splatterpunk authors. I struggled a bit to wrap my head around what it was, and to me it was always faster paced and a wee bit more hardcore. But I mentioned on, I think it was on one of the last episodes of the podcast, or I mentioned it somewhere when I was talking, saying that I think that, you know, for me, hardcore horror, I kind of say Matt Shaw kind of coined that, because when his Black Book started coming out, that was where I heard everybody speaking about hardcore horror, extreme horror. Before that, there were some authors where I heard it mentioned, like Rath James White and Edward Lee, who certainly write really extreme stuff. But it was when I started seeing Matt Shaw do really well and having these black cover books that everybody was talking about hardcore and extreme horror. And I think a lot more people come along at that point and started writing it. As you'll know, subgenres sometimes come in waves, and everybody, you know, or even, you know, like zombie books were at for ages, or you could get with zombie books for horror for a while, and then it moves on, and then things go out of fashion.
I mean, so a quick question for you about my stuff. It's I've seen myself referred to quite regularly, surprisingly regularly, as someone who writes extreme horror or splatterpunk, and I don't think I do at all. What are your thoughts?
I think some of your books could fall into the splatterpunk genre. Certainly the faster paced ones, because that's something I just tie in with splatter. But I've never read a slow burn splatterpunk book. I don't think they really
That's fair.
go together. Extreme, I don't know, because after I read everything Richard Lehman had written and I started looking for other authors, two of the authors that I did fall in love with their work was Rath James White and Edward Lee. And I must have read 40 books by Edward Lee and probably about 15 by Rath James White. And some of their stuff's insane, like really, really visceral, like, you know, but like for most of the book, whereas yours probably have quite extreme moments and bigger stories. And I think for me that, and people will disagree. There'll be somebody who'll comment and they'll disagree, you know. And there was I've seen two different reviews where people have said for the splatterpunk book, I really enjoyed this book. I don't know if I'd call it splatterpunk. And I think it's one of the, I knew when I was calling it Splatterpunk Dreams that was going to be a comment in a review at some point or other, because what I see is splatterpunk or extreme or whatever. And even when I pitched the book to authors, I didn't say it has to be splatterpunk. I said to everybody, I'm looking for stories that are either splatterpunk or extreme, because every single author that I invited probably's got a slightly different view of it than I have. And I didn't want to exclude anybody or have people thinking I had a story idea, but is it extreme enough? Is it splatterpunk? And, you know, I thought, do you know what? You're always going to have people that will disagree with you in almost anything. I thought, I'm going to put the book together. I'm going to read the stories, and I'm going to pick the ones that I think fall into that category that work for me, that I think is a splatterpunk tale. That's really what I've done for the start. And a bit like you had said about what Sean Hudson said about Guy N. Smith, and I like Guy's work as well. But he had said, obviously, read it and thought I could do better. So when I started writing at the start, it was just short stories. I'm different for yourself, and I didn't write until probably I wrote my first short story to send away to a publisher for an advert that I seen on Facebook. I just wrote a story and sent it in, and I continued for there. And I'd done it for about a year. And after about a year, I had a load of stories accepted. And a few of them into books that I thought were quite good, and a few of them into books that when I got a copy of the book, I wasn't that impressed by the book. And, you know, after a wee while, again, you stop reading the books because you've not got time to read every anthology that you get a story into. But based on, I was looking at sales, how many, you know, where it's sitting in an Amazon chart, how many reviews it's got and things like that. And it's like, and if you're writing, you want to see what people think of what you've wrote. So if it's not getting many reviews, you know, and the reviews that are there maybe don't even mention your story. And I just looked at it for a while and I thought, I could do that better. I could put a book together that I think people would want to leave a review for, that would get more sales. And I've always enjoyed seasonal horror. And I was looking at all the Christmas horror that was available, and I'm thinking to myself, do you know what? A lot of it is really not dated, but older horror, you know, and it's still maybe really popular, but we need some modern horror for authors that I read and enjoy. Basically, I went to loads of people in the indie market that had read their novels or novellas in the last year or two, and sent them a wee invite to do a short Christmas horror story for me. and that was my first anthology. Imaginatively named Collected Christmas Horror Shorts. And
That's what it says on the tin, yeah.
well, that's exactly it. Again, being inspired by Layman, a lot of Layman's books have got like a one-word title, or that in another word. And you know, if a lot of your books are the same, that's something, and it's, you know, it's going to grab you into it. If you see that and you like the sound, then you're going to go and read the synopsis. And I thought, Collected Christmas Horror Shorts. Anybody that fancies some new Christmas horror is going to give it a look at least. And it done amazing. I think I released, I can't remember the exact date I released it, but basically went straight to the top of the charts in the UK and the US. Well, for the anthology horror chart anyway. And it stayed there for quite a while after Christmas as well. And I thought, I'm going to do another book. And it started off quite slow. I'd done an Easter book because a Christmas book had done well. And again, there was very little Easter horror. And it's grew for there. And now sitting probably, I think, around about 8 years later, I've published, I think, 42 anthologies, something like that. So, and they tend to be pretty popular, and they tend to go to the top of the charts and stay there for a while. So I know people are enjoying them, and the reviews are overall pretty positive. I kind of keep a high average rating. So I think sometimes it's, you know, you don't need to necessarily be inspired by something that you read that's brilliant and think, oh, I wish I could do that. Sometimes you do look at something and think, I could maybe do that a wee bit better. And then the next thing, you know, you're heavily involved in it. As I say, like yourself, obviously reading Sean Hudson, really like him. You're not saying, obviously, that you didn't enjoy his work, though.
Oh.
But that's obviously what inspired one of, well, maybe your favourite author. So it's funny, people get into it different ways. And as I say, I was literally sitting on the floor, endlessly scrolling one day on Facebook, and I seen an advert saying, we're looking for horror stories. I think it was over 3,000 words. You don't ever need to have been published before. And I remember when I read all the time, I used to always say, it'd be great to have a wee story in a book. And that was just a passing comment. And then eventually I done it, and it's kind of grew from there over the years. So it's interesting to see how people get started and move on. Do you read any? So we've already sort of discussed at times limited. In the busier you are, even now that you're writing full time, you'll probably be, your aim is to do more, so there'll still be time constraints in what you can do. But do you read much indie horror? Do you read much of the newer stuff that's coming out?
I did read quite a bit a few years ago. I find struggling to read as much as I did. I read people like Steve Stredd, obviously, my good friend Steve Stredd. I think he's
co-authored a book with.
Absolutely, yeah. He's been in a lot of
years, that right?
Navajo Nightmare, that's right. We did a horror western. That's really good fun. That I loved writing that, and Steve's great to work with. I read every single thing of his because I sort of do not full edit generally, but I do a bit of editing on his stuff. So I've read every single thing he's ever published. And I've read something like Judith Sonnet. It was fantastic. Brian Berry, Gemma Moore, Laurel Hightower, folk like that. And a few of them have gone on to trad publishing and stuff now. But I really enjoy reading indie horror because it tends to give you something that the traditionally published stuff doesn't, or is less likely to give you. I like stuff that maybe pushes.
I agree.
Yeah, it's
that's when I've probably stumbled across indie horror at the time. It was a bit different. As I say, the Amazon options to publish didn't exist at the time, so a lot of the guys that I was reading at the time were going through small presses, so I'd kind of discovered places like Cemetery Dance and things like that because they were selling books by Richard Layman and Ray Garton and different authors like Jack Ketchum, probably Brian Keane, I think, at one point. And then I had kind of, a lot of the guys were working with Leisure Publishing at the time through Dorchester, and you were getting a lot of really, really solid paperbacks for them that were fantastic, but they would have other books coming out through the small presses, which at the time really that was your indie horror. I think Dorchester was kind of mid-market, but a lot of the other stuff that they were putting out, probably the more extreme stuff, was coming for the smaller presses. And I don't think a lot of the presses are probably closed down now, to be fair. But obviously the indie market's exploded with Kindle Direct Publishing opening up. People can put a book out fairly easily.
And isn't always a good thing, but it can be a really good thing.
I think, see for me, I think it's probably, there's a lot of stuff out that the quality probably isn't there, but generally, if you do a few minutes research and you look at the reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, if the books get 50 reviews and it's sitting at 4.9 stars, and they've managed to get loads of people that know to give it a rating, if the book, is doing really well and it's got loads of reviews, you can normally assume the average rating is going to be fairly accurate. Which I think, I find Goodreads a great site to go and get some feedback on what's out there. And I tend not to read books as soon as you come out because of that first wee. And as you've said, your friends and family might not read your book, but a lot of people will get a bit of support for that first book. Everybody will say, oh, it's brilliant, and whether they've read it or not. So I think you need to be careful, but I think because it's easier for people to get in now that, we're maybe getting rejections, but their work was pretty good. I mean, some of these publishers could only put out so many books a year, so they were maybe knocking back some really good stuff. I think sometimes there's a wee bit of who as well. There's some stuff that gets pumped has been brilliant, and you read it and it's not so good. But I think that I would rather have the volume there, and then just be a wee bit picky with what I read and things like that. And I think you get to know who gives you suggestions that will be solid as well. There's certain people that will say, read this book, and you're going to enjoy it because a certain person's recommended it. Steve Strain's an author that I really enjoy as well, and again, I've worked with Steve multiple times actually. He's in quite a few of my books, and I own the book, The Navajo Nightmare. The reason I haven't read that one yet, because that's probably, of the other ones I have, that's probably the one I've had the longest, but the market a wee while ago was a bit flooded with Western horror, and I had read a few, and Westerns they're not my favourite type of movies, and I've never read a Western book. I've only read Western horror, and I've really enjoyed some of it. Tim Curran does some good Western horror or really dark Western stuff that's brilliant. And I think, was it Christopher Triana that wrote The 13th Coyote?
Yeah, I think
really enjoyed that book. But I had read quite a few. I think it was Death's Head Press that put out about 20 of them in a row over the space of a relatively short period of time. And I scunnered myself a wee bit, and I thought, I'm going to leave it to him in the right frame of mind to read it, because there'll be a point where I'm looking for something a wee bit different from what I normally read, and I'll dive into that because it's two authors that I quite enjoy. Or I really enjoy, but as I say, I'm just not ready just not ready for a Western horror now. But it does lead me on to my next question. How did you find the co-writing process?
It was an absolute breeze because I was working with Steve, who is, as you know, the nicest man in horror. So, I'm an absolute nightmare to write with because I can only write what I'm obsessed with at that moment. So, I mean, we've got a second book unrelated to Navajo that we've been planning for about 2 years, maybe more, and it's just him sitting waiting on me writing my part. And I will when I did write it, and I was like, no, this is shit, and I scrapped the entire thing. So but the way we did it was very much I will write my half of the book. So I write the first half. It's basically 2 novellas. So I wrote my half, and then he wrote his half, and we just made sure that his follows on the story, but follows on years later. So it was easy enough. It was just a case of both of us writing novellas that are vaguely tied in, and then trying to sort of make them have a similar flow in language, so it doesn't feel totally dissimilar. But we wanted to have our different voices and things. So it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, and I will do it again, Steve. If you're listening, I promise I will write that part of that story. But I don't know when, man.
That's not on video, Steve. You've got him. No, it's interesting because again, I've wrote mostly short stories, and when I read mostly novellas these days. I do love a novel, but again, time constraints and novellas are generally faster paced, which suits me. So, but again, I don't need to read it over weeks. I can maybe read it over a day or two if I've got 2 days with a bit of free time. So I read a lot of novellas, and At the start, I had spoke to there's a guy called JC Michael, and the two of us wrote a novella together, but it was a bit, probably cheated a wee bit. So what we done was wrote 4 short stories, 2 each. And in the book, it's basically 4 authors that have been told, write the best short story you can write. They're going to get killed. They've upset somebody, and this is the sort of what they have to do. So the stories are actually in the book, and then we wrote the overarching story to surround everything. And the 2 years wrote it. So it's got 4 short stories that are from these authors rather than us within the book that we wrote. So we've done that way. The next one I wrote was with a lady called Christina Berglund, and we almost just wrote a chapter each, back and forward. And it's a sort of post-apocalyptic book. It's called Screechers, and they're basically they're sort of they're the top sort of predator in this new world. And I wrote the creatures bits, and she wrote the human bits. But what we done when we finished the book is we went back, and I kind of went over her bits, and then she went back and went over my bits to change some bits of language and make everything flow, as you say, so it doesn't seem jarring or that it's been written by 2 different writers. So both of them were really different sort of processes. And I enjoyed both of them immensely. It was great fun. And Christina and I actually, a good few years ago, well, a good chunk of they went to writing the sequel to Screechers, but my father had passed away, and I just stopped writing. I continued putting the anthologies together because reading was a good pastime. So if you send me a story and I sit and read it, that's not as hard as me sitting trying to focus and writing something. So I continued with anthologies, but I didn't really write much. So that's something that we've spoke about going back to, and we'll probably finish at some point. But I quite like the co-writing process, but it's interesting to hear how somebody else does it, where you've actually done you've done 2 separate novellas, and then, as you say, go over it.
Yeah, I would only ever collaborate with Steve. There's no one else. He knows me long enough to know how difficult and how controlling I am of my whatever I publish. So yeah, it's I get people messaging me now being like, "Hey, you want to collaborate?" And I'm like, "Who are you? You've just followed me just now." And no, I don't. I don't want to. I will collaborate with Steve and nobody else. That's final.
Yeah. No, I think you know yourself best who to write with. And as I say, it's very much you maybe need somebody down the line a wee bit, and I think I'd love to work with them as well. You never know, but it's good to have somebody there that you know you're not for you. Well, listen, the thing is, I see I'm quite enjoying your solo books, so I'm quite happy if you stay just sort of releasing the solo books. So, did you say that you've got 2 or 3 books pretty much at the finish line? Did I pick you up correctly?
Yeah, well, actually 4.
Yeah.
I've got I've got the one I just finished. I've got a coming of age sort of one. That should be my next one. After that, I've got an extreme horror / splatterpunk / whatever the hell you want, because people kept saying that I wrote extreme horror. I was like, well, okay, do you know what? I will write one, and this is what it will be. So it's horrible. It is nasty stuff. It's definitely by far the most extreme thing I've written, but it's also kind of fun. So there's that, and then I've got a sort of. I got one that I wrote just in between those two. Just I never remember my dreams, but for once I actually remembered a dream, and I had dreamt an entire story. So I just wrote that, and it's coming at about 20,000 words, so it's currently pretty much useless. So I'm not sure what to do with that. I might write a second story of similar length and put them into.
Well, 20,000 words is novella length, as I say, so you could just put a lot of people like it. I know a lot of your books are 300 sort of pages, but.
Well, my problem is that I cannot stand how on Amazon, if you publish a book that's less than 100 pages, you're not able to put text on the spine, and I hate when I get a book that has no text on the spine. I will not publish one that cannot have that. So I will never publish anything less than 100 pages ever, because it's just aesthetically unpleasant. So
I've got multiple books with nothing on the spine, you know.
I hate it.
Not necessarily mine, but I've just been books I've bought, and it comes in, and then you've got a stack of books and you don't know what any of them are on the shelf.
And another reason as well, from a purely sort of boring business marketing reason, is a lot of people post their book stacks that they buy on Instagram with the spines facing out. And if they can't, no one can read your spine, then it's useless. So,
how do you find then? So probably talking about that leads on. So the spine is important, especially if you're looking at it on a bookshelf. I think these days, predominantly what people see is your front cover, because Kindle's massive. People are sharing on, social media all the time, and a lot of the time people share your front cover. I often, after I get the full wrap for the paperback, I'll post that on Facebook, but you still find that people tend to share the front cover of the book. How do you mentioned at the start when you were talking about time and we were talking about reading, you're saying, well, writing it, editing it, the format and the working with the cover designer, the marketing it is generally most authors that I know these days, even guys that have been writing for 40 odd years, that have probably moved away a wee bit from traditional publishing because sometimes there's more money to be made doing it the indie route yourself. But it's a big job. You're not just a writer anymore. You're doing all that stuff. How do you find the marketing side of it and talking to your fans and try to bring new people on board and get the word about your books out there?
I'm lucky in that I have a pug who's extremely photogenic. And so I tend to just post pictures of my books with him. I don't do a whole lot of marketing. I'm very lucky in that I've got a really, really amazing sort of readership who are very, very heavily into social media and who share all my stuff for me. Like they people read the book, enjoy it, and they post it, and then I just reshare that. And it doesn't matter if they've got 1 million followers or 20 followers. It doesn't matter. They're posting that. I can then share it. People will see it. So most of my marketing is word of mouth. I've never spent any money ever on like Facebook ads or TikTok or anything like that. I've just gotten lucky that I've got a handsome dog and that people are so good at sharing pictures of my book, and not just pictures of it. Like some of these people go to the most extraordinary lengths to do these like mini masterpieces of art and special effects and stuff. Like there's some unbelievably talented people out there. Who just enjoy reading books and posting about them, and thank you to every single one of you, because I wouldn't have a career without these people. So it's amazing. My main marketing really is just that I review a horror film every single day on Twitter, or X, if you want to call it that. And that's all I do, really. I don't do it much at all. I wouldn't know where to start. I tried getting into TikTok. I did 5 or 10 or something, and it's just I think I'm too old for TikTok now. I don't understand any of it at all. And I'm
TikTok's good to watch. TikTok's good if you're in the gym. I sit out in the cross trainer and I'll watch TikTok videos that are about a minute long while you're kind of running. And otherwise, I struggle if I'm just listening to music. I'm still bored after 20 minutes. So I get kind of motivational videos up, and then every so often somebody pops up reviewing a horror book. So that gets me through a sort of hour on the cross trainer. That's the best thing, TikTok. For anybody that doesn't know, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but your press is called Paperback and Pugs.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And that is based on that's I should have been wearing my t-shirt. I've got a branded t-shirt now. I'm very professional. It's my wife did the logo, which is my little pug Boris. And he's the mascot, really. There's a pug in every single one of my books, except for one. And it's just, I mean, that's the two things that people follow me for on any social media. On Instagram, certainly, is either paperbacks or pugs. So it just seemed like a very appropriate thing to name it. And also, my wife's logo that she made is so incredibly cute that I just love seeing it on the spine, especially if these really gnarly, gruesome horror books, having a little pug with his tongue. Just fucking love it, man.
I think you need to do little things for yourself, whether it's to get you through that writing day or whether it's just because it's your book and you want to do that. I think over, the years with the short stories I've written and things like that, my memory's terrible even with my own work, but I've mentioned my cats, I've mentioned my wee dog that had passed away. I've not written my new puppy into any stories yet, but I'm sure he'll appear. But these are wee things for me. And I seen Facebook that last week, I think it was Duncan Ralston posted saying authors aren't their characters. And I was discussing it the other week with, it was either Simon Clark or God Rollo, and we were talking about how you always put wee bits of yourself into the story. So like the setting in my new vampire novella, there's a wee bit at the start of the set in the gym, because these days I'm spending an awful lot of time in the gym. It's just a wee part of my life. And there's other wee mentions of things that come from my life, but the characters very, very much know me. But I think it's good to drop in wee things, as I say. It might be I read that book again in 25 years and there's a wee memory of what I was doing at the time, although it's not me,
Yeah.
I think I like to just put wee things in there that I think if somebody's reading all your books as well, it's good to have wee links and stuff like that in there. When I used to read all sort of Brian Keane's books, he had loads of, I don't know if you've read much for Keane, but he's got like a labyrinth mythos. And it's almost like a shared universe. Like you maybe get a cat. So The Rising was a popular book, and there's a prostitute in it called Frankie, and I can't remember what other book, but she's in a different book, but she's a different version of her. If you know what I mean. So it's a bit like the sort of string theory, everything's linked, but there's other versions. And then he's now started releasing a series of books that are called The Labyrinth, and each one's got a different title. But he's brought back characters. I think, if you remember, the first book's got 6 characters for 6 different novels who are now in the same world. And it kind of goes for there. And there's some of the different monsters or demons or whatever for other books, and he's brought them into this labyrinth that connects everything. And it's quite intricate, and I love it. I love stuff like that. So I think it's good to have things in your books for yourself as well as the readers. Wee Easter eggs, I think.
I was quite impressed. Somebody on Instagram, spotted that a certain location from my 10th book was actually very, very, very briefly referenced in my second book, and I just was absolutely staggered that anyone actually noticed that. Maybe she just got lucky.
What was your second release?
Night Shoot.
And you mentioned earlier that the Forbidden Island wasn't your first release, but wasn't it? It was Night Shoot, the first book you wrote then?
No, I wrote one that has never been published. I did I don't know how you put it, NaNoWriMo, the National November Writing Month.
Right, a book a month kind of thing.
Yeah, I tried that and I wrote one, and it's rubbish, but it had enough good stuff that I have since taken all the good stuff and used them in other books. So it's never going to be published because all the good parts of it have been used now, but the general idea of it is actually going to be used again in a sequel to a certain book that I will be writing in a couple of years. But yeah, it was fine for a first try at a novel. It wasn't a disaster, but it led on to Forgotten Island, which was much more successful.
I've got a paperback copy somewhere of Night Shoot that I bought at the same time, I believe, as I bought for. I've said it wrong. There's a Forgotten Island. I said Forbidden Island.
So Forgotten Island. Everyone seems to call it the Forbidden Island. So people post a photo.
I wonder why.
The Forbidden Island. It's like it's written on the front of Forgotten Island. I've made peace with it now. As long as they're talking about it, it doesn't matter if they get the name wrong. It's fine.
That's it. No, I bought the 2 of them, and then I've lost my copy of Night Shoot. But as I said, I've got probably between paperbacks and hardbacks, I must have about 1,000 books. And I predominantly read Kindle because although I have a Kindle, I've got the Kindle app on my phone, and I've always got my phone wherever I go. So if I'm sitting waiting somewhere, I can read a few pages. So that tends to be where I do most of my reading. And I've lost my copy of Night Shoot. So that will probably end up in the last book. I know that's it. I already get another one. But I've got copies, as I said, of the Navajo Nightmare. And what's the one with the black and white cover, and it's got something God in the title?
By God's hand you shall die.
I've got a copy of that as well, and then obviously Rotten Tommy's your last release, isn't it? I've not picked that up yet.
That's right. Yeah. Available on Amazon.
Loads of stuff there.
God's Hand is probably the closest I've come to doing an extreme horror so far. I'd say that's pretty grim, pretty nasty stuff. My mum didn't like it.
No. I give my mum a copy of my books, but I don't think she likes to read the foreword and the afterword and stuff like that. But see if I've dedicated it to anybody, but she doesn't read the actual stories. That's very much not for her.
Oh, my mum's read every single one of mine.
Oh, has she?
Now, as she's a member of the church and stuff, I said, please don't read them by God's hand, you shall die, because it's extremely blasphemous. And she read it anyway. Pardon me. She really liked the horror. That's her favorite one, for obvious reasons. If you've read it, it's the
That was
nicest.
brilliant. I
Thank
love
you.
the
Thank
horror.
you.
So,
Yeah, that was her favorite.
which obviously you've got 4 books lined up. You're writing full time now. Are you doing anything else in the horror world? Because obviously these days everybody's doing, I've seen a few of these game books come out where you kind of choose your own adventures and things like that. People are always trying to break into horror movies. There's a ton of other stuff that comes, I suppose, along with horror writing. Are you doing anything else in the horror industry at the moment?
Yes, I am.
Can you speak about it?
I am doing. I'm working in another medium, and there's some other things that are, we're trying. There's stuff happening, but it happens incredibly slowly. So, look out in the next 5 years, 10 years, who knows?
I've spoke to a lot of people that have had books optioned for film and things like that. If you see it quite a lot on different authors' pages, and some of them are guys that are, they've been wildly successful for years and the movie never happens. So there's obviously a lot of waiting involved and stuff like that. So, but I'll be interested to see what comes next. I'll be
So will I.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, some cool stuff on the cards. Certainly, I'm just looking forward to just writing more books. That's my favorite thing. Everything else is like, oh, so even really cool, fun, huge, important things. I'm like, oh, I just want to sit and write. So grateful, but it's just hopefully shit will happen.
No, that's brilliant. So you've mentioned your books a few times. You've not told us your titles. Can you release the titles of anything upcoming for us to look forward to? Have you got the titles yet? Even?
Well, unfortunately, the next one coming out, I'm still completely undecided on the title. I've got about 15 different ones. The extreme one coming out after that, that's called Death Spell. Death Spell. So the one after, I've got the other two, but they're so far away. I'm not even going to say them because they are not coming out till 2025, late 2025. But Death Spell's one to watch, and the other one is currently, you know what? I can't find a title for this one that I even half like. So I don't even want to say any of them because they're all terrible, and I don't know what it is. I've never had problem coming up with a title before.
Is that the one that you're hoping to release in October?
Yes. I've got some real thinking to do. But I just
left.
It's a weird one because I can either go for a title that I quite like, but it doesn't make it sound like it's much of a horror because it sounds like it could be totally not a horror at all. It very much is, but it's other things as well. So try to find something that has that balance of this is a horror, but also you might like it even if you don't like horror. It's really tough. I don't know. I might put it to my Patreons or something. I'll put a list of titles and say, what one do you like? Because I can't decide, which is really annoying.
I'll be interested to see. You've not got an awful lot of time to make that decision, so I hope to see it sort of early October. I'll be interested to see what you come up with. So again, for everybody, as David's just mentioned, he's on Patreon. If any of you want to follow him, do you want to sort of mention a wee bit about? Do you have tiers or what are you offering your patrons?
It's just the one tier. What I would say is join before November if you want to, because in November, if you're using an iPhone, the price goes up about 40% because of Apple forcing them to do that. So if you want to get in at the lower price, it will stay at the lower price, which is I think £5 a month. You've had short stories in there. You've had exclusive updates. I've gone to the locations where I based some of my books and done videos. you will get each release about a week before it actually comes out on as an ebook. It's and it's just a nice community of people who, because social media is really tough now to get to with the algorithm.
Yeah,
People that you used to reach don't see your posts anymore, and you don't
yeah,
see your friends posting things. It's difficult. Whereas this, you post once a week, sometimes twice. They get an email. They'll go and look, and you can have a nice chat. You can actually have a proper chat with people on it, which is you can't really do on social media now. It's just
yeah.
it's a garbage fire. So
No, I
uh,
mean they want you to pay. They want you to pay so that everybody sees your post rather than just
yeah,
the algorithms. You're lucky if 10% of the people on your page actually see the stuff you're posting, so it's quite difficult.
it sucks. I've had people who like messaged me like a year later saying, "Oh, I didn't realize your book was out," because they hadn't seen it anywhere, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. What can you do? You can just try and post as many places as you can, and hope that the algorithm smiles favorably upon you one day, like a
Yeah.
benevolent god. Yeah, it
Oh,
sucks.
that's it. And part of the reason that I started this podcast, I thought if I'm going to have loads of different authors on that I enjoy, there's going to be some crossover with people's tastes. So, as I say, I know that I tend to find one author through another author. You're talking about, I might be talking about you and somebody will say, oh, if you like David Sodergren, do you know who you should read? And then you give them a try, and often they either write similar themes or they get similar pacing or there's something there that grips you kind of thing. So I thought if I'm going to do a wee podcast and bring on all the authors that I read, and hopefully people find other authors through that as well. So yourself, although you're saying you don't do that much actual advertising online, you're lucky that your fan base is sharing your stuff, but they'll be sharing that across multiple mediums. You'll have guys in TikTok, Twitter, as you say, Direct, whatever they want to call it. You have people in Facebook, and I always see posts pop up if I'm maybe searching for something in Google. It seems an awful lot of people talk on Reddit about horror. It's not
Yeah,
something I'm not on Reddit at all. I've never used it, but it seems to be. But as I say, the more places that people are talking about your work, then the better.
yeah, you'll get that where you'll suddenly see this huge sales spike, and you'll just have to assume that someone on Reddit or TikTok or something has said something. I mean, I've got. I should give a shout out to Brandon Baker on TikTok, because it was Brandon going on about the Har and Maggie's grave that really was a genuine like turning point
Yeah,
for me as an author. It was sales, and then he started talking about it, and the sales just. I realize anyone listening to this didn't see that hand movement I just did on the video, but sales went up. So
yeah,
yeah, thanks to people like Brandon, and then over on Instagram, like Your Spooky Mom, Ellie, Jobis, Joanne, and stuff like they're just they're so dedicated, and they're so kind to devote so much time and to just sing your praises. It's really lovely, and I think we need to remember some things that we wouldn't be what we are without the passion and the dedication of like the fans and the readers and things. It's great.
yeah. I don't think people sometimes don't realise how important it is when they're talking about your books online. As I say, for the days when I was just a reader, I was in a load of horror groups just to get suggestions. That's why I was in there, to see who people were talking about, who was the next person to just release something that everybody was reading and saying it was brilliant, because as I said earlier, if a high percentage of people all love something, it's worth a try. It doesn't mean to say you're going to love it yourself, but it's
Yeah,
definitely worth a try. And I think that these groups filled with readers, as I say, they're always, they're often looking to help authors out. And it's as simple as that: mention it somewhere, tell somebody about the book, post a review in Goodreads or Amazon or whatever. And these days, as I say, I know a lot of people are making video reviews and stuff like that on TikTok. As I say, I tend to watch more sort of motivational videos when I'm in the gym on it. But it's hard to stay on top of all the social media as well. There's only so many hours in the day, and it's trying to see
yeah.
what you can done. But it definitely helps if you get people out there boosting your work.
Yeah, I just say to just stick with Twitter and Instagram, because I've got like a Mastodon and a Blue Sky and a TikTok and I don't know, MySpace or something, whatever the hell.
Yeah,
And yeah, I'd never get any writing done. if I devoted all my time to those, there'd be no time for anything. So yeah,
Fine. And one of the other things I wanted to ask you was your covers. I love your covers. Do you use the same cover designer for each book?
Cover artists I've used the amazing Trevor Henderson quite a few times. I want to say 4 or 5 times. I've used quite a few different artists. The actual design itself, with the sort of the box with the art inside it and stuff, that was actually my wife used to do those for me, and then she taught me how to do it. So I now, from I think Maggie's Grave onwards, I've done all my own sort of cover design. It's just the actual art itself is. I can do it to a relatively low standard, but so that's where I get someone who's much more talented than I am for that. Trevor, a few times I've used Connor Leslie, who is a guy that I used to just work with, who turned out to be an incredibly talented artist. He did like the Dead Girl Blues cover, absolutely beautiful. Worked with like Gemma Moore, Ryan William K. Sorry, I think did I just get your name wrong? Oh, I'm sorry, man. No, Ryan William K. Yeah. And I've got a couple of really interesting new artists I've worked with on my upcoming books as well. One is a guy who mostly works in heavy metal covers, and I've got one where the actual cover has been embroidered. So I'm going to get a photograph of the embroidery. It ties in thematically with the book. Oh, that's the 5th book I'm working on. Yeah, I forgot about that one. I've got the cover for it. I've not started writing it yet, but it's fully outlined. But covers are so important. They're absolutely so important. The one thing where you have to have a good cover. It's like if you are a new author on the scene, and you're writing a book, if you put it out with a cheap, unprofessional, ugly cover, you're fucked. I don't care how good the book is.
100%.
Yeah, people are not going to see that and want to buy it. People are not going to want to read, even if they enjoy it, they're not going to post it because it's an ugly cover. Like, please, like you don't have to spend loads of money either. There's loads of like really
there's a load of sites where you can get a reasonably priced cover, and the thing is I would even argue that, you know what, see if you need to go and take a wee part-time job for a few weeks to save a few quid up, it'll be worth it in the long run, because you spend a lot of time, especially in the early days, really trying to pump your book and get people to read the book. You're offering free copies to people just to get some reviews out there maybe at the start. If it's got a fantastic cover, people will give it a chance. This whole don't judge a book by its cover, they're not talking about, I don't think it's for an actual book. If you're looking at a book and the cover's crap, unless you already read the author and you've read other books and I love this person, then you're not going to read it. It's massively important, as I say. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, it's so important, and I mean, and you can get a Shutterstock, image for £20 or something like that. That and a little bit of graphic design, and I would be wary of that because I see a lot of the exact same images appearing on several different covers.
I've seen that over the years myself quite a bit. But then some of the images are amazing, and that other people are going to use it if you buy it. I think the worry these days is that there's so much AI stuff out there, and it's trying to avoid it. I don't buy the images myself. I use almost everything I've done for years. The cover's been done by Michael Bray. And Michael Bray is a graphic designer as well as a horror author, but he's great, and we were talking about it the other day, and he was looking for a particular image and there was loads of AI stuff, and he eventually found a way to search and cut all the AI stuff out, but it's getting probably slightly more difficult to tell, and I think it will continue to improve. And there might be a stage where if these sites aren't actually making you say this is an AI image, get to the stage where you could be accidentally buying AI images without knowing. Somebody was talking about one of my covers the other day. It was a boon for Inside the Indie Horror World. It's the only non-fiction book I've done, and I love the image. Somebody says that's an AI image. It's not an AI image. And there was a wee sort of, and I thought, I'm not going to argue about it or anything like that. And do you know what? I was sitting after them, like, well, maybe it was an AI image. How do I know? Although obviously I know Bray's trying to avoid using them at all costs, but I think it's going to become more difficult to tell.
Yeah, I write under other names as well, and one of the books I published under a pseudonym, I saw someone say that was an AI cover, and it's not. It's just that I'm really bad at painting. When I'd done it with a graphic tablet, I have the entire file that I can remove all the colors and shading and stuff. So like, if I wanted to, I could prove it, but it's like, who gives a fuck at the end of the day?
People jump the bandwagon.
It's
I think
not AI. It was really annoying.
people like to complain, and I think, it gives them something to sit and bond over. People say, "Oh, it's an AI cover," and you're like, "Well, it's not." But as you say, it's not really worth worrying about, is it? As I say, if it bothers you, don't buy the book. Somebody else will.
Exactly. Yeah. Jeez.
So we kind of mentioned before that I've spoke to David before, and he writes under it. As far as I know, one pseudonym. I don't know if you write under other
Oh, who
pseudonyms.
can say?
We're not going to go into details of that, but at some point in the future, David might let everybody know who that is. So he'll maybe come back on here around about the time if he's telling people. We'll see if we can get him back on. Listen, it was absolutely lovely speaking to you, David. I've been reading your work for a while. As I said, I've read 6 of your 10 books, so I've still got another 40. Keep me going until you get these new releases out. I'm looking forward to that. I'll certainly be sharing on social media when I see them. And I'm glad you're writing full time now so that we get more books from you.
Absolutely.
But as I say, for anybody looking, all of David's work is available on Amazon. Is there anywhere else in particular that they should be looking for your work, or is that your kind of main?
It's just on Amazon at the moment. However, I am aware that people sometimes don't like buying on Amazon, so I'm looking into getting them. Two things. One, so you'll be able to order them to shops. That's taken a long time because in the UK it's very expensive. But also, I'm going to be hopefully selling signed copies through my website in October. I'm going to be at the HorrorCon Scotland on September 21st. So any leftover stock I have from that will be going onto my website to be sold as signed copies. In theory, I'm quite slow moving at things like that.
For anybody local, David, where is that HorrorCon? What date's it on again?
It's September 21st, and that is in Glasgow at is it the SCC? Oh God, I can't remember.
I remember seeing it. I think Matt Shaw is going to it, and there's another horror author or two going as well. I cannot remember who else is going though.
There's MJ Mars.
Right, okay.
Are you going to go on?
I might pop along just as a visitor. I'm certainly.
Yeah.
I've never done a convention yet, David. That's something that I get asked a lot. I've been asked to go to a few conventions in America, and I've not done a convention in Scotland yet. So it's something that I probably will do at some point. I've got more than enough books out. The books do well, so I think if I had to turn up at a con, it would probably be quite a good day. I don't know whether having sort of more own stuff out there will inspire me rather than going with a ton of anthologies. I don't know. I've been to a few visitors and authors that I've spoke to that have been at the conventions have sometimes said it's really hit and miss.
Yeah.
And I just think, I want to spend a full Saturday and Sunday sitting at a convention that people are there to see movie stuff rather than horror books. And because Amazon, you go into Amazon, you buy my book, they send you my book. I'm not really involved in the process once the book's finished. And I do like that. I don't have a website. I don't sell signed paperbacks. I don't do a lot of the stuff that a lot of other people do, which I see the benefits to doing it. And I know sometimes people want your signed books. You will know as well as me that being in Scotland, sending stuff to America is costly. And it probably looks like, you're charging people quite a lot of money, when in reality, you probably need to try and not make too much profit in the book to actually give them a reasonably good deal, because the postage is mental. And I don't know the split you get, but I go in and I look on Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing, and 90% of my sales will be in America.
Oh, yeah.
All stuff comes into play when I think about doing conventions.
Yeah, I think 75% sales are in America, about 10% are Canada. It's like UK accounts for very, very little, which is the only.
I get 3% Canada. I get, I think, 2% between the other places, which is like Germany, Italy, France, places like that. I don't know. The UK is maybe 10% or something. I'm not sure, but as I say, it's or
It's always nice
8%.
when you get one from India or Japan or Mexico, because they're the ones that you very
Interesting.
rarely get. So it's always exciting. Like, oh, somebody in Mexico's read the book. Great. You know?
See, I might pop along to the con, as I say, and get a chat with yourself and MJ and Matt and things like that. I think it'd be quite good to pop along with your visit. I need to actually go in and look at the tickets. As I say, I used to actually go to a lot more conventions just as a visitor. But you know, some of them you go in, and there would only be one or two people there that were like maybe writing or drawing comics. You wouldn't actually have any authors as such. And
Oh,
I read the odd comic, but
I did one couple of years back. It was an Edinburgh one, and it was a sort of sci-fi fantasy horror it was billed as. And certainly, if you were at the sci-fi and fantasy, it would have been absolutely fantastic. But I was the only horror author there, and it seems that there was no horror fans there either. So I sat at my table for all Saturday and all Sunday, people walking past going, "Oh, horror! Oh, no thanks!" I'm walking past. I sold 5 books, I think, that first one, and on Saturday and Sunday, I was just like, what an absolute waste of time this is. So it's like it can't be worse than that. I think Laura, who runs HorrorCon Scotland, is she puts a lot of work, a lot of effort into this. I know she sold a good amount of tickets, and she's very keen to have authors and artists and craftspeople and things there. So I think it sounds like a good sort of selection of people should be coming. I am looking to do a con in America at some point, but
they just recently had the one there for the Books of Horror, Books and Brews, and that looked like it went pretty well. That seemed like a good day. And there's the ones that Brian Keane does, Scares That Care.
Yeah, I looked into them, but it's so difficult to get to because they're in like it's like flight. You'd have to get 2 flights from Scotland, 3 because you'd have to go to London, then to either in like Williamsburg or in St. Louis or something. There's no direct flights, put it that way. So it was just I had a look, and the price it was about $2,000 for the flights. I was like, oh fuck that. Maybe one day.
The longest flights I've been to places like Greece and Turkey, so you're talking about 4.5 hours. To go to America, you're normally talking about 10 hours, and if you then need to throw a second or a third flight in there, it puts me off. I think, as I say, I know a few British authors or Irish authors as well had went over to recent events, but I don't know because maybe they had to get a few planes. As I say, it's maybe something I'd like to do one day. Some would probably prefer to do when I was retired. Just go and do a wee tour of America and maybe stop at a few conventions en route. I like the idea of seeing America and travelling a wee bit, but I don't think I'd want to go over just to do a convention.
No, that's it. We're going over next year, but it's for my wife's birthday, and we're doing like Disneyland and stuff. Like, so I'm not going to go to a horror con when we're there celebrating my wife's birthday. So yeah.
It's the options always on the table. If you decide to do it at some point, you can do it. I'm sure the Glasgow one, because it's specifically a horror convention, is going to be better, obviously. But as I said, a lot of them are mixed. I've been to quite a lot of conventions that are swung more towards sort of comic book stuff and that, even if there's a lot of kind of maybe horror comics and things like that there, but nobody's looking to buy novels or anthologies or whatever. Not that I've had stock there, but it just didn't seem like that kind of place. I think if you're looking to go and do conventions in America, Matt Shaw, I think, again, has done quite a few. It's maybe worth speaking to him, but then he's probably flying out of London as well. Obviously, we're up in Scotland, so, you're maybe going to have to fly.
Fucked up here, aren't we, mate?
Nothing. Well, you've got us too. You've got Kyle M. Scott. I don't know if you've read him. He's a good Scottish horror author. He's an indie guy. And then William Meiko's been a bit for a while. I don't know if you've read William's work, but I think does he live in Canada somewhere like that?
No, it doesn't count.
But he writes Scottish horror. They say he is Scottish. So, it's prohibitive. There's not an awful. It's a small place.
I know. Big fish in a small pond, mate. Let's enjoy it.
Well, listen, David, thanks very much for coming on, mate. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. As I say, I'm looking forward to reading your new books and the ones I've still got outstanding. As I say, obviously, I'll keep in touch with you offline and things like that, and hopefully get you involved in a few more of the books over the years as well.
Fantastic, man. Yeah, no, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Cheers, man.